This video is going to be my reaction to the Lions' 52-14 win over the Titans in Week 8, a win that moved them to 6-1, number one, but also was very unique in the way that it was accomplished. 6 different players scored touchdowns, and they were all of different varieties. The depth of the roster, I think, was really revealed here against a team that's not very good, obviously, but Detroit was able to overwhelm them in pretty much every location on the field, other than Calvin Ridley, who put up 100 yards receiving in the first quarter and I think finished with 10 catches. Khalif Raymond had 2 touchdowns today, including the 90-yard punt return that made it 42-14 early in the third quarter. There was just a flurry of activity in this game, particularly in the first quarter, but even over the first 32 minutes. Jared Goff only had to attempt 15 passes on a day when the left side of the offensive line really had issues. Arden Key gave them trouble. He gave Decker problems. 2 sacks on the day, more on Arden Key later. Jeffrey Simmons also hit Goff low once during a time period where I thought Goff's ankle looked like he was moving a little slow. Detroit only generated 61 passing yards, but got a short field, I think 4 times, for 4 of their first 6 scores. Truly remarkable from the standpoint of the yardage gained on the day. They got so many short field opportunities from interceptions, punt returns, or kickoff returns. Amik Robertson forced 2 fumbles. Kirby Joseph and Trevor Nowaski had interceptions. Back to Raymond for a moment. I'm going to use him as an illustrative point. It's a testament to the depth of the roster because you have Jameson Williams out, and Khalif Raymond, among others today, don't get me wrong, performed to the highest of their ability, at least at the NFL level. Raymond only had 2 catches for 14 yards. One of them was a touchdown. He did have the 5 punt returns for 190 yards. The last 3 weeks, Khalif Raymond has had 9 catches on 12 targets, 126 yards receiving, so over 10 yards per target, not per catch, but per target, 2 touchdowns. The punt return contribution today, in minimal opportunities this year, he's had a big impact. I think he came into the day 11 of 15 catches overall, puts him at 13 of 17 this year, if I did my math right. 2 touchdowns receiving in the last 2 weeks. David Montgomery ran for a touchdown. He threw for another. That one was to Laporta to make it 35-14 at the half. Gibbs had another 100-yard day, and that was almost forgotten in some ways among how many guys played well, how many guys had an impact on Sunday. Defensively, talked about Robertson having the 2 forced fumbles. Branch, I thought, had 1 or maybe 2 penalties, but also had 2 really nice stops down there as the Lions made a goal line stand in the third quarter, or at the end of the second quarter, excuse me. Jack Campbell had 11 tackles. Anzalone did have a sack. The pass rush was not something that I think you could say was really evident today, even though Mason Rudolph threw the football a bunch overall. I think 38 total attempts. So many guys played a role today. There's really no need for me to do a possession breakdown, number one. Number two, I watched this game after watching the Ravens lose to the Cleveland Browns, which is difficult to even say that out loud for how bad the Browns season has been so far. Their defense is obviously pretty good if they're all healthy and all out there on the field, but they weren't today. And so a frustrating day for me to watch the Ravens lose. It felt kind of nice to sit and watch the Lions play and perform well. And so many, I can only imagine what it was like to watch it live. I didn't get a chance to do that, but it looked like just an avalanche of playmakers. And again, I think that speaks to how the talent is dispersed across the roster, up and down the roster, on the offense and defensive special teams clearly. 6 overall touchdowns in the first 18 and a half minutes. So the first quarter plus, the teams traded 6 touchdowns. Detroit goes up 28-14 on the play action from Goff to St. Brown early in the third quarter. I think it's like 11:40 left in the second quarter. Excuse me, not the third. So a little less than 18 and a half minutes, 6 overall touchdowns scored. Pretty remarkable. Calvin Ridley, 100 yards receiving in the first quarter. He gave everybody problems. It did. CD3, Arnold, Branch. I think he beat Branch on a slot fade. He just seemed to give everybody issues. Looked really sharp today, if you ask me. Lions had the 2 interceptions early, Nowaski and then Kirby Joseph. And then some huge punt and kick returns led to them really, the stats being skewed a little bit too much for me to really evaluate. For only having 61 passing yards. It's very unusual to score 50 points, let alone, or it's very unusual to win a game, let alone score 52 points like Detroit did today. Jahmyr Gibbs, I feel like, is a guy that if he had gotten the ball 18 or 20 times today, would have popped another run or two. He had the 70-yarder to put the Lions up 14-7, which is what the score was at the end of the first quarter. Mason Rudolph throws a touchdown early second quarter, I think the third play of the second quarter, to tie it. And then all of a sudden, less than 14 minutes later, in fact, about 12 minutes later, it's 35-14 Lions when Montgomery takes a handoff, or a toss, to the right side and then tosses it to Laporta in the end zone for a 3-yard touchdown. I thought that the defense had guys swarming to the football, and I thought that was manifested or proven, I guess, by how many forced fumbles they had, how many ball carriers kind of had the ball dislodged. I thought there was 2 other situations where it looked like a guy was going to fumble, and then they did not. Nowaski's been playing well. Now, he did get juked by Mason Rudolph on the touchdown run in the first quarter, so that's an issue from an athleticism standpoint. But he had an interception. I think he's got 2 sacks on the year, so he's an interesting guy. I saved up about 10 or 12 plays of his last week and certainly do a film study video on him on Monday, along with Khalif Raymond. To the point where it's 14-14 early in the second quarter, I, of course, knew that the Lions had won by the time I got to watch the game. I mean, I saw what the score was at halftime, 35-14, and I was like, all right, well, they're in control. They're going to absolutely finish this off. And when I began to watch the game, I knew that the final score ended up being 52-14, but I didn't know how it happened necessarily. And to see the just deluge of how many guys were involved in that second quarter was pretty unbelievable. It reminded me a little bit of the third quarter against the Seahawks. The only difference is in that situation, the Seahawks and the Lions were both scoring a ton of points, making a lot of plays. In this case, Detroit took it from 14-14 to 35-14. Seemed like it happened super fast. They got the short field to score 5 touchdowns up to the half and had only gained 133 total yards, which is kind of difficult to even believe. Actually in the first half, I think Tennessee outgained them 285 to 133. The kick return and the punt return yardage play a role in that, obviously. To see them score 52 points, including 42 in the first 32 minutes of the game, mind you, on just 47 plays overall, tells you how efficient the offense is. 5 for 5 in the red zone. If you compare that, now granted the level of defense that they're facing maybe isn't comparable to Tampa Bay, but I think 1 of 7 in that week 2 loss inside of like the 25-yard line, maybe the red zone, something like that. So when the kick return, punt return, or interception game got them the ball down there inside the red zone, they capitalized. They finished off Tennessee. And I thought the pass pro, well, you had one possession where the Titans had 2 sacks, I believe, on the same possession, and in fact forced a fumble by Goff. He finishes 12 of 15. I thought it was time to get him out. When I believe it's 42-14. Yeah, 42-14 after Raymond's punt return. To me, I'm like, I'm getting him out of here if the Titans don't score on the next possession. And they kept him in, and he threw a touchdown pass to Khalif Raymond to make it 49-14. Hendon Hooker eventually got in. Overall on the day, the offense still ran for 164 in terms of rushing attack on 24 carries, 6.8 yards per carry. Defense forced 4 turnovers. Really fun game to watch in retrospect, or in hindsight, I should say. Try it sometime. Watch a game after you have already watched after you already know the result. Now, leading into next week is going to be a huge test. They go to Green Bay on November 3rd, and that is a collision. I mean, if you can get a win over the Vikings on the road and the Packers on the road to get to 7-1, I understand that the differential between the Lions and the other teams only be 2. At that point, would only be 2 in the loss column. That almost really looks like a 3-game lead because all of those teams still have to play each other, meaning we would expect the Vikings, and I do expect the Vikings to get more losses. If you watch them play on Thursday night, look at them when they tried to play man. We kind of talked about that a little bit after the reaction video to the Lions win in Minnesota, that their inability to play man is glaring when they do try to. And I think that's one of the reasons why Brian Flores goes to so much mug looks, fake blitzes, simulated pressures, if you will, whatever you want to call it, because he understands that his guys can't play man, and he wants to force the quarterback into dealing with that type of post-snap processing. What the heck coverage is it? Is there going to be pressure right on top of me immediately? As opposed to, hey, it's man, let me throw it over there to that guy who I know is going to get open. And that dynamic occurred with Khalif Raymond, in fact, against Stephon Gilmore in that game, if you recall. And I think it happened again on Thursday night to a degree. One thing I want to mention before we get out of here in terms of the reaction video, if you're interested in a player at defensive end for the Lions to look at, Josh Pascal was sick this week, obviously, so that he played quite well against Minnesota, and I think he's going to get a lot of opportunities, as well he should, on this roster. One player I have to mention, if you watched him today, really impressive, long, athletic. The Ravens actually tried to sign him before the 2022 season, I believe, and that's Arden Key. He had 2 sacks today, 2 clean wins against Decker. I mean, the first sack was an obliteration. Decker has not looked great in pass pro to me in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Perhaps he doesn't have that many sacks attributed or assigned to him. That's fine. Feel free to quote those stats to me if you wish. But just watching him in pass pro against some of the guys he's been exposed to, he's out-athleted. They beat him with speed rushes, and I've seen them beat him to the inside as well. And Arden Key was one of them. 2 sacks today. Very interesting player, in my opinion, for the Lions to possibly look at acquiring. And here's why. He's 28 years old. I think he's got a $4.2 million cap hit this year, and then a $9.3 million cap hit next year at age 29. But that'll be the culmination of a 3-year contract with the Titans that he signed before 2023. Very productive player, intelligent, in my opinion, long and athletic. I think he fits in the Lions' scheme, what they do well, if the Lions are, in fact, looking to go acquire someone that wouldn't force them to break the bank, if you will, in terms of giving up too many draft picks. I do think something is in the works. I've said that since day one after the Aiden Hutchinson injury. I understand that there may be people who disagree. You can't get it done with the defensive end outside linebacker group that's on this roster right now. I just don't think the talent level is there against some of the better quarterbacks you're going to face in terms of generating consistent pass rush, getting to the quarterback. And in fact, if you look at today's production, you had 1 sack. That one was by Anzalone on a read-out blitz, and 5 quarterback hits. That's against the Tennessee Titans offensive line that, number one, I don't think is that high quality, and Mason Rudolph doesn't compare to some of the quarterbacks you're going to face this year during the regular season, in the NFC playoffs, and hopefully in the Super Bowl. So I think Arden Key looks like a perfect candidate for this roster salary-wise because of how much cap there is available in Detroit through smart planning by the front office and Brad Holmes. In any case, I appreciate you guys' time for checking this video out. Shortened reaction video because, again, I watched the condensed version and made notes as I went along. A little bit different than what I would normally do, but detailed stuff. I'll have to get the possession video done this week where I have the down, distance, personnel, formation, play result all published, and I can put that in video form so you guys can see it. But if you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comments section, first of all. Second of all, if you think other Lions fans would like to hear some of my thoughts and the key points that I noticed in the game, watching it secondhand, or watching it late, I should say, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reached. Additional to that, I want to have a personnel group film study out this week on the Lions. I'd like to take a look at their 12 personnel groups because I noticed a couple of things that they do that seem to be somewhat different from what most teams do when they have 2 tight ends on the field. Essentially, putting one of the tight ends in the backfield as a fullback, running the ball with the tight end / fullback as a lead blocker, and or play action concepts built off of it. There are some teams that do that, but the Lions seem to operate from a different philosophy, if you ask me, when they put a tight end in the backfield. In any case, I appreciate you guys' time.